Alright guys, so in this episode I'm going to show you how to get rid of this ugly ass fucking breather tube that, you know, pretty ghetto, and replace it with something a lot more clean, classy, and I guess functional. So let's do it. So this is my 1991 Toyota Hilux Surf, or 4Runner as it's called in Australia. Yeah, at the moment we're in the middle of doing a air locker in the rear, so you can check that out in another video. Also doing a whole lot of other stuff. I've done a custom exhaust, front bearings, front hubs, also done the rear hubs, so you'll be able to check out how to do that. Rear wheel bearings, hubs, brakes, etc. in another video. But this one I'm going to be upgrading the breather kit. So as a lot of you know, if you're going underwater with your four-wheel drive, you know, your factory breather point, which is basically at this level here, will fill up with water, and you'll basically have ingress of water into your differential, and also transfer case and gearbox and front diff. So I'm going to basically show you guys how to, on this car, pretty much the same deal, but obviously slightly different components, etc. How to do a proper diff breather setup with, I'm sure a lot of you have probably seen these before. These with the sintered bronze little filters and the push lock fittings. I've bought a kit. It comes with, I think it's 1/4 inch plastic hardline, the adapter fittings that go into the diff, or diff, transfer case, gearbox, etc. Some of these I might not, actually no, 2 of these I don't need because I've already done the transfer case and the gearbox, so I'll show you guys how I did that on this car. And then this basically goes in the engine bay, and each one comes up to its own port. So yeah, I guess first up I'll start with what I think is the hardest two on these, and that is the gearbox and the transfer case. More so the transfer case. I've actually already done this when I was in that area. I pulled out the shifter and put a new bushing because it was really floppy and repacked with grease, etc. But I did take some photos, so I'll run you guys through how I did that right now. Alright, so hopping into this messy passenger seat, still under construction obviously, still a lot of things to be tidied up. But as you can see here, this is the breather for the gearbox, and the one right down here, that is the one for the transfer case. So, as you can see what I've done, I've got some silicone hose here. Basically, as you can see in the picture, yeah, it comes factory with like this little labyrinth type, I guess you'd call it. You know, it's still open, but it stops majority of water and dirt ingress, but obviously that's not good enough. So I'll start with the gearbox. That one's probably the easier of them. So basically, you take your shifter off, 4 bolts, and then you tip it upside down and you get a drift punch from the back side and basically punch this factory one out. And then crazily, in the workshop here, there were some aluminium barbs that were the exact same dimension. So I just used some Loctite retaining compound, which is used for like interference fit bearings and stuff. So that's well and truly locked in now. That just pushed in, retaining compound sets, and that's all good. This one was a different story for the transfer case. So what I had to do was, I'll put a photo on the screen. I had to get the slide hammer and make an attachment. I think I ended up, actually here we go, here's the actual, here's the top of it still sitting in the glove box. What I ended up doing was popping this off, and then I basically got my tap. I can't remember what size it was, like M6 or something. M6 tap down inside it, tapped a thread, and then got a bolt, as you can see on the picture, and then basically slide hammered it out. It took a bit of effort. I didn't really want to remove, actually I don't even think you can do it without removing the transfer case, so that's how I did it. It's a bit of a pain. Thankfully I had the tools to do it, but it is well worth doing. So my plan now is basically I'll just run that 1/4 inch hardline into these, and that's it. So I won't need those 2 fittings. So I guess essentially what I got to do now is put my fitting in the rear diff, put my fitting in the front diff, and then run an individual line for each one up to the engine bay, where I will then mount the breather set. It's actually a really simple mod. I guess you call it a mod. It's kind of a necessity if you're going to go through water and any serious four-wheel driving. And it's just a lot neater than, most people just get a bit of rubber and just hang it up a bit higher. It's pretty fucking lousy, pretty lazy. Well, I think that kit cost me like $100 or something, not even. You could rustle up the parts yourself for even cheaper probably. But for me, being so short on time, it's easy enough just to buy a kit, as I'm sure most of you guys are probably the same. So I'm going to get cracking on that, and I'll see you back in the engine bay for the final rough in. Alright, so one little detail I'll show you guys. As you can see, I've got the rear diff one out, which is right here, as you can see, connected to the rubber hose, so that can go bye-bye. These ones do come with an O-ring to seal, but I always do anyway. I get some, I like this anaerobic sealant, so non-hardening anaerobic. I will just put a little bit up with threads. If not, you could use some RTV or some Loctite even, but I'm just gonna goop that up just in case, and then she's good to go. There we go, just nip it up. Not too tight to strip the threads, obviously. We've got that compound on there, so that will definitely seal up, as well as the O-ring. And there you go, that's ready just to push the line into. So I'll now move around to the front. So this one's a little bit harder to see to get the camera in, but as you can see, that is the breather right there. Relatively easy access from the front. Set this up. So basically same deal again. Undo the old one, put the new one in, and then pop the hose in. So I'll do that off camera because it's the same deal as before, and we'll move on. Alright guys, so front and back ones are in. As you saw, gearbox and transfer case are also done. So now it's time to get your 1/4" hard line, or hard plastic line. And literally all you have to do, firstly obviously make sure it's got a half decent end on it, which this one does, minus this little dag. So basically these push lock fittings, they push in, and it's just a whole heap of metal barbs that hold the hose into the O-ring. These do wear out over time, but these aren't taking any pressure or anything, so these will be fine. Really good type of fitting, that's for sure. Very neat and very quick, so you literally just push that in, and then to get rid of it, or to pull it out, you push evenly on the tab, push it in, and that will just pull out. So that's just disengaging the spurs that hold it in, basically. Very similar to a garden hose, I would liken it to. Anyways, it's just a matter of now running this somewhat out of the way, obviously from your exhaust and any other moving drivetrain components, and then run it into the engine bay. So before I rolled the camera, I jumped in the engine bay, decided where I was going to run it. I'm going to end up running it up the passenger side, so the left-hand side of the gearbox. I'll just poke it up there. There's plenty of length on this stuff, so we should have plenty of hose. And then, once these are all run, we'll go in the engine bay, set up the breather block, mount it on the firewall where we want it, and then just plumb all these in, and we're good to go. Another thing to remember, obviously, is allow for this to flex. You don't want to have it super tight. So yeah, be pretty generous with the amount of slack here. Remember that this axle will go like that. It is on full droop at the moment, so we shouldn't get much more, but better safe than sorry, that's all I can say. What I've done, I've just run it on top of the heat shield that's above this rear muffler here, over the top of the rear cross member, I suppose you'd call it, and then down. Push in, locked off. And obviously here, cable ties are your friends. So anywhere where it can rub against a hard part, I would suggest cable tying, because over time it can actually wear through. Like I said, not like it's holding pressure or anything, but you don't want to have any low point of basically entry for any water or grime. Alright, so I guess before I stitch this all back up again, I'll show you the detail now that it's hooked up. Pretty straightforward, literally that hard line just pushes into the silicone hose. That ain't go anywhere, they're a really good fit. I've actually done this on lines on some of my other cars for boost. I normally spray a little bit of hairspray though in that joiner, which locks it in when it dries. It's a really good little trick. Also works on your silicone couplers as well. So yeah, they will basically just slide down out of the way, obviously not kink them, and that's good to go. I can put that cover back on. Actually I've got the part, I've just got to put it on now, a new rubber seal so that it doesn't leak. Well, water doesn't get in because this one was torn, so that wouldn't have been good. Alright guys, so all my lines are run. I'll give you a demo after we do this. When I put the car back up on the hoist, I'll show you how I run them. Nothing special, there's probably a million different ways you can do it, but I'll show you mine in case you're short of ideas. So what I've done, I've left them a little bit longer. I'm hoping to leave them this length just in case I ever need to move this. I probably never will, but this car is under the early stages of some performance modifications, so there's going to be plenty more custom stuff to come. I think I'm pretty well safe there. I could pretty much cut them off, I think, but I'll see if I can get them long. I always try and do that with things like fuel lines, etc. So yeah, I'm just going to basically, they do provide you with several nickel plated self-tapping screws, but they're just going to rust out. And they'll probably rattle loose as well. So what I'm going to do is, more than likely I'll just, I probably won't be able to get the drill into the far, maybe. I'll try to get all three in. I'm basically just going to put a nutsert in. I'll probably just do the outside too, I reckon. Put probably a 5mm, well, it looks like that, 5mm nutsert, a couple of 5mm bolts with some locking washers, and we'll whack that in. So there you have it, all mounted up, nice and still, nice and tucked, and nice and high, which is the important thing. So it's literally just a matter of routing all my hoses. So there we go. Diff breathers, done. Hopefully you can see that. Nice and stealthy. Very cool. Alright, well I'll chuck this car up on the hoist and I'll show you underneath, and then we'll wrap this up. Okay, so I guess starting at the rear diff, you see there, it goes up. I've attached it to this top trailing arm, and I've run it through this rubber bush for the exhaust just to make sure it doesn't rub against this chassis or anything. So that goes there, and it goes up and over, and then snakes on the top of this heat shield, down here, over the top of this cross member, and then it ties to the fuel rails. And then a bit further along here, see the two from the transfer case and the gearbox come in, tie to the same thing, and then head on up there. And then I've got the one on the front, as you can see there, put the 90-degree one on. It's a bit of a pain to get in actually, but once you've got it started, it's not too bad. And then that snakes down under there, and then up there, and you can probably see it joins. That one there joins back into the others, and then straight up to the breather block. So yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. It's a pretty simple mod. This took me, I don't know, an hour and a half maybe with filming. So yeah, really easy to do. Hopefully this helps some of you guys out there who aren't sure how to do it, etc, etc. So you basically need to do that if you're going to be going through any water or mud or anything like that. So yeah, anyways, if you're not already, follow this build. We're going to do some really cool stuff. First up, we're just getting the drivetrain basically bulletproof, well, to a point where we know what's done and that it's going to hold up. And then we'll move on to some power mods, and we'll start upgrading the 2LTE. We've got some pretty magical stuff up our sleeves, Benny and I, so yeah, stay tuned for that.